need a good tank vacuum.
I do have it. That's what I have really well. And I'm doing all my furniture and all my wood with that. Yeah. Lindsay, did you say Lindsay? Yeah, I think it is. Right.
It's stuck for about 2 years.
Yeah, no, this doesn't have any odor at all at night. Yeah. We were at the new brewery across the street last night.
Oh.
Yeah, is that in the... It's in the old Urban Edge.
Oh, in the Urban Edge.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was in the new section right across from the Genesee or Urban Edge.
It's in Urban Edge. But it's nice. I mean, there were a lot of people there, and it was just the soft open, so they looked like they were drinking.
I'm not a beer drinker, but I go down just for socialization.
Somebody in another setting and you don't know.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to beautiful Oakwood Cemetery. Today, we are sharing history while we are making history. You see, this just so happens to be the 25th year of our cemetery walk. 25 years. Now, one of the questions that we often get is, have you run out of people yet to portray? Oh no. I did the math. We haven't yet done 2% of the burials here at Oakwood. So we have 1,935 more years to go. Yes, we have lots more milestones to hit. We'll hope to see you at each one. So we have a while still, don't we? Almost not yet 2% of the stories told in this beautiful cemetery. What we have for you today, though, to celebrate 25 years, our greatest hits. So we brought back some of our favorite stories, some of the favorite personas for you today. We hope you enjoy. On behalf of the Waukegan Park District, the Waukegan Historical Society, and the City of Waukegan, thank you for coming and enjoy the 25th Annual Oakwood Cemetery Walk. Oh, thank you. Thank you. The benches, the first four benches right here as a group. Does that work out for everybody? Okay. You will be with Jerry.
Hi everyone, I'm Jerry. Welcome to the Cemetery Walk. We're all just going to come with me. We're going to step right over here. One thing really quickly, just make sure you watch your step throughout the cemetery. It's really uneven because it's quite old. Okay, and so it's easy to lose your footing. Okay, so be careful. Be careful. I love your Ladies and gentlemen, George W. Bell.
Oh my goodness.
Well, good afternoon. You caught me in the middle of my chores. Ladies, please excuse me for being uncovered. I apologize. Massa wants me to do the cooking on time. In this pot, I've got some goldenrod brewing because Massa got a headache. Oh, I learned to cook from the Tuskegee Indians down in Tennessee. That's where I was born. Periodically, I cook for Mr. Lincoln when he comes through. Those of you who have farms nearby, if this fruit was foraged from one of your trees, then I apologize. These berries here can be used for all kinds of bloodletting ailments. They're pokeberries. You can make a tea from the leaves if you want to. It's not as good as the goldenrod. These over here, I find y'all Yankees are just strange. I saw people cutting down and throwing away the ditch litters. And down in Tennessee, we dry them and make a wonderful tea out of them. And of course, you got to clean up when you're done. Cooking and cleaning and foraging is just one of the things that a body servant does for a Confederate officer. One of the other things we do. And ladies, if you wrap your bedding in horseweed, the fleas don't bite on it. And you gotta do the laundry. I heard tell another slave from a different company, when he was doing the laundry, his master got shot. The boy died. That boy took that man's body all the way back to the plantation so he could be buried with his family. A lot of people think that's a strange thing, but a lot of y'all Yankees don't realize those of us that we are body servants for, many of them are related to us. My master is my half brother. Not legally, of course, but we got the same daddy. You may be wondering how a slave come to have a gun. This gun and this bit of fabric in my hat share the same story. Back in Tennessee, Massa had me working at his distillery as, I guess you all would call him the foreman, but basically the guard. So one day, me and Massa, he was out foraging, as I do so well. And we got caught by some of them Yankee soldiers, and we was given a choice. Either go to prison, or I can guard these railroad tracks. Having been a guard, it was a natural thing for me. But guarding the railroad tracks and this gun got me in trouble, and I'm basically on my way to prison. I was guarding the train, and a boy from a neighboring plantation comes running up and says, Mr. Bell, they're getting ready to take all the women folk and move them to Chattanooga. Well, one of them women folk was Emily. This is a piece of her wedding dress right here. She was my sweetheart. So I took my army gun and I went to the engineer of the train and I said, don't you move this train with my sweetheart on this train. And out of respect to the ladies, I will not repeat what he said to me. And I said, if you move the train, I'm going to shoot you dead. He moved the train. My sweetheart was on that train. I ain't a liar. I shot him dead. I'm about to be court-martialed for the murder, and I'll probably spend some time in prison. But me and Emily, we don't get married after this mess finishes. And much as I love Tennessee, and I love my master, we probably going to move to Illinois. Walter, my oldest son, he already got a job being a chauffeur for Mr. Price up in a town called Waukegan. I'm going to leave my sister here. She's fine. But as much as I served my master, not the cause, I still long for Tennessee. And I do wish I was born.
Oh, I wish I was in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten.
Thank y'all for visiting.
Look away to Dixieland. In Dixieland, where I was born.
So the newspaper account stated that George W. Bell was one of the city's famous characters. He proudly shared stories of his time as a cook for the Union Army, saying that Abraham Lincoln knew him and his cooking very well.
We're going this way? Take a seat.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hobart Yard.
Hobart P. Yard, taken by death. Veteran journalist, operated news bureau in Chicago for many years. I didn't write this headline. No, not this one. I wrote many other headlines and the stories that fill the pages below them. But this one is about me. Veteran journalist? I guess one could say that. While still in my teens, I began folding and mailing papers for the local rags. At that time, I was writing stories for the Gazette and the Lake County Patriot. All this while attending school. I later became a general news correspondent and supplied news for the Daily Sun, the Waukegan Gazette, the Daily News, and the Waukegan News Sun. In 1906, I opened an office in Chicago under the name of Yard's News Bureau and serviced Chicagoland papers for many years. I even covered the Cook County Probate Court for over 75 Midwest newspapers. I guess for many, I was a familiar sight in the Waukegan and Chicago newsrooms for over 60 years. James M. Woodman, God bless his soul, owner of the Waukegan Gazette, had these kind words for me. Probably no other present-day citizen of Waukegan has had such intimate knowledge of the daily happenings and progress of the city since its entrance upon an industrial era as H.P. Yard. I am proud of that description indeed, for I do pride myself on having a keen interest in the daily lives of this town's great citizens. If I may, I have with me my journals. There's quite a few of them. I've been writing in them since I was 11, and I have 70 years of them. I've taken note of what I think are the most important local events and some important personal details as well. If you don't mind, I'd like to read from them. "1875, Thursday, October 21st. A fire broke out in the courthouse and it was burned to its foundation. 1878, Thursday, April 18th. Went to the laying of the cornerstone of the new courthouse at noon. Thursday, September 12th. We got out of school at 3 o'clock so as to see President Hayes pass through. He did not pass until 4:45, but I saw him and his wife and shook hands with him. 1881, Sunday. Brand's Barbershop, a meat market, and Jocelyn's store were being burnt. 1882. I was woke at midnight and went down to a fire at Powell and Douglas factory. A big windmill was burnt up. 1889. January 21st. Central School burned down. It would cost $30,000 to build a new one. Insurance only paid $15,000. I guess I should just let you know that a lot of important places burned down. I'll try and keep things a little bit lighter. 1885, Saturday, January 31st. Mr. W.P. Chisholm had been killed in Barry's Mill. He was alone upstairs and was caught by a belt and whirled around the shaft until his limbs were broken and he was dead. So much for the lighter part. I apologize if I've put off any of you ladies with my gruesome remembrances. March 1st, Aunt Eunice is up from El Paso, Illinois. Ma wouldn't want me associating with anyone from Texas. Wednesday, August 12th. A female baseball 9 played a pick 9 of men at the fairgrounds this p.m. 1888. Sunday, April 22nd. Took a walk out to Dr. Price's new house in the afternoon. It is a great jumble in architecture. 1889, July 8th. Work underway on sugar refinery and railway. 1890, January 1st. Elgin, Juliet, and Eastern Railway line opened here yesterday. September 2nd. Ma and I drove out to Loon Lake in Antioch today. We got started late since she insisted I change my outfit until it suited her. Friday, October 10th. Tonight the papers report the incorporation at Springfield of the Waukegan City Railway, its object being to construct a street railway here. 1892, February 13th. Brilliant aurora borealis in the northern sky tonight. March 22nd. New sewer system planned to cost $64,000. Seems awfully high, but I imagine that's what it takes to run a city. 1893, May 1st. The Chicago World's Fair and Columbian Exposition opened today. May 6th. First visit to the fair. Ma was furious I did not take her along. May 20th. Second visit to the fair. First with Ma. May 29th. Third visit to the fair. I took Hattie Sluman. Ma did not approve. June 24th. Fourth trip to the fair. Planned to take Grace Hill, but Ma put her foot down. Said she was not good enough for me. Took Ma instead. July 8th. Fifth trip to fair. Managed to make it there alone. July 26th. Sixth trip to fair. Third with Ma. July 29th. Seventh trip to fair. I asked Grace Hill to go. She asked if my Ma was still alive, told her yes, and never heard back from her. I took 3 trips to the fair in August, once with Ma. September 10th, 11th trip to fair on Sunday. Finally convinced Pa to come along. Ma was not happy we skipped Sunday services. September 16th, 12th trip to fair, Pa, Ma, and I. October 9th, 13th and final trip to fair. It was Chicago Day. 750,000 people here. Ma was not one of them, but Hattie Gillespie was. Did not tell Ma. She does not approve. October 26th, James Yeoman died, age 80. Also, took Hattie Gillespie to see the play America. Ma still disapproves of Hattie and the play. October 30th, World's Fair closes. November 23rd, was down at the YMCA. They organized an indoor baseball league tonight. July 14th, the Society people have organized a country club and leased the Clay Farms northwest of here at the end of North Avenue. I rode my wheel up to the golf club and saw them finish their first tourney. August 20th, a special election on a park district was held today. It was defeated as likely to cause too much expense and trouble. August 28th, met Mrs. Lucy Booth at the Grand Army of the Republic parade. September 30th, saw a play in Chicago with Lucy Booth. September 20th, or 30th, excuse me. Told Ma about Lucy Booth, a divorcee. Ma strongly objected to me ever seeing her again. October 1st, Ma took sick. October 8th, Mother died. Funeral on the 10th. November 1st, I married Lucy Booth today.
Oh, Hobie, darling. Did you tell them about Ma's passing?
Hello, darling. Yes, of course. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here right now. So glad you could make it. Oh, please, not in public, Lucy.
What on earth are you looking for?
Making sure Mother's not here.
She's not here. I think we know where she is. Sorry, I was just trying to lighten the mood for our guests.
They're a very alert bunch.
Oh. Did you tell them about the first time we had electricity in '05? Or in '07 when the Benison Theater opened next to the Carnegie Library? And the wonderful vaudeville shows we got to see?
I was just about to. I was in the middle of reading my journals when I came upon the entry about our marriage. And I just wanted to tell them about the wonderful times we've had together.
Oh, darling, they don't want to hear about our life together. They want to hear about the things that happened back in those days in Waukegan.
They meant so much to me. We had so little time together.
Is it more important than, say, your coverage of the only Chicago World Series between the Sox and the Cubs?
The Sox did win, of course.
Or your columns on the Russian Revolution?
They were just so important to me, yes, but you are so dear to me.
Stay focused, my dear Hobie. Remember why we're here.
Lucy.
Goodbye, Hobie, darling.
No, wait. September 20th, 1913. Lucy died. 1914, Sunday, May 17th. The new Southside Ball Grounds were open today. On August 6th, the Chicago White Sox came up and played. 1917, Tuesday, January 9th. Went to the Academy tonight. There was a big crowd out to see the Jules Verne 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea film.
Blah, blah, blah. I think it's time you mentioned your second wife, Hobart.
Yes, of course. 1927, November 24th. Married Bess Bublitz. Bess has a daughter, now my stepdaughter, a lovely girl named Evie.
Hobart, did you tell them how important and respected we were in this town? Go on, tell them.
I don't know if that's true, Bess. I like to think that I was more of a behind-the-scenes reporter.
You were a very important part of this town's history.
It was more that I reported on the history rather than being a large part of it.
We were invited to all the important events and dedications in this town. Go on, tell them.
I'm not really comfortable with the direction of this, Bess.
Oh, you're not comfortable? Did you think I was comfortable with you running to watch every building being built or every fire that burnt it down? Well, let me tell you, Hobart P. Yard.
Bess dies. November 20th, 1941. I'm sorry you had to witness that. Ma would definitely have put her foot down about Bess. Well, I guess that's enough for now. Thank you for your time. Good day.
In 1949, Hobart Yard slipped and fell on the ice and broke his leg. He died a few years later at the age of 89. In addition to Hobart and his two wives being buried here, there are his mother and his father, as well as his grandmother and his aunt. The journals of Hobart Yard are an important source for understanding the past, and they are part of the archives of the Waukegan Historical Society.
So where is he buried?
Where are you buried?
He is buried right next to his second wife,
Oh, okay.
right
A
here.
little bit back.
And then the other grave marker is their aunt.
Right, so
Okay.
we're going to move on. Again, just remember to watch your step.
Yes. It is uneven ground, and hopefully the rain has dried up. I wore rubber shoes. Good for you. It's a big day.
See, like right here. We'll wait for people to catch up a little bit. Sure. Okay. Okay. All right. Just keep following me. So sorry. Hey everyone, this is Mr. Henry Hutchinson.
Well, thank you. I must say, I'm a little surprised. I was just walking from the sugar refinery. You all know where that is. It's just right over there. You get a great view, actually, of it over there. There's a little clearing in the trees, and you can see business. And then I was walking back, I saw a crowd. Well, I'm a politician. I love crowds. So if you'll humor me, you know, I've got a little love story to tell you. And it's not about my first wife or my second wife. It's about Waukegan. I love Waukegan. It's a city of business, of progress, of potential. And I had a little something to do with that. At least I like to think so. But my story didn't start here in Waukegan. My story started way out east. I grew up as a child in New England. My family taught me the history of my ancestors who fought in the War for Independence. And I liked it there and all. It was beautiful. But, you know, in New England, I couldn't get away with what I was wearing today. And they looked at you cross-eyed if you didn't have an overcoat on. So I moved west when I was young. Settled in Libertyville originally. But Libertyville, it was fine. But I was drawn here. And I opened up a store here in Waukegan. Now, store owners need to like crowds too, and so people came and went in my store, and I was talking to them about all sorts of things. Politics, local happenings, anything they really wanted to. Well, years passed by, and I saw Waukegan growing a little stale. You know, we had had some people come up here to live, to settle. We actually hit some hard times. You all probably remember those. The 1870s. It was pretty tough then. We had an economic disaster all across the country, and it hit here too. But I thought I had some ideas to get things started, and I just ran them past people in my shop, but, you know, they all said, well, I should run for public office, I should get people involved. No. Politics is for the corrupt. I had ethical standards. Right? I was a working man. They were humoring me with that, and I always said, no. We'll leave that to other people. Well, the next part of the story was kind of embarrassing. So I had some family business to tend to out in Iowa. It was going to take me away from my store, actually, for a couple months. So I hired some people to watch over it for me. My wife and I, we went out to Iowa. Now, as we were taking care of some family matters out there, people in Waukegan, my so-called friends, they all conspired against me. They campaigned to have me for mayor of Waukegan, got my name on the ballot, all of this without any sort of confirmation with me first, and I came home from Iowa, and I had been elected as mayor of this city. I was incredibly upset, worried. And I actually was heading down to City Hall. I was going to stop this from happening. But my friends talked me out of it. And they said, we wanted you to be mayor because you had such good ideas. Now, folks, I haven't told you really much about my politics. I grew up a Whig. You all remember the Whigs, I'm sure. Now the Whigs, not these kind of Whigs, by the way. You know, the Whigs. The Whigs were, well, do you remember what they were about? You know, that's not your fault. That's the Whigs' fault. The Whigs never got their message clearly to the people. Now, I eventually switched parties because of Abraham Lincoln, who was also started as a Whig. But I always held that Whig mentality. And the Whigs were about transportation. It's probably how you all got here today, right? You all took the train, right? Of course you did. How else would you get here? But I had a vision. See, Waukegan had a train, the Northwestern line, and it was nice, but it was a passenger rail. You know, took people to and from Chicago, and that was great, but that wasn't going to help business. You know, people thought that we had these mineral springs here. They thought that was going to bring people into Waukegan. I've drank these mineral waters. You know, they keep you regular, but that's fine. That's not going to draw people to Waukegan.
So anyhow, long story short, I had visions of bringing another railway here. Because if I thought I could get a freight liner here, we could open up factories on this beautiful lake and business would boom. So, I was in two conversations at the same time. One was with a group building a Beltline railway around Chicago to avoid all that rail traffic in Chicago. And as I was talking to them, I was also corresponding with some business owners in Chicago who owned a sugar refinery in Buffalo, New York. And they were looking to move their business to Chicago because they wanted to be closer to these Western markets. The country's growing. West is the future. So my sugar talk stalled because they wouldn't come here without a freight line. And the freight line that was coming in, they wanted to terminate the freight train in Highland Park. I got nothing against Highland Park, but I was able to talk business owners of that railway into moving right here to Waukegan. Terminate the rail line right here in this very city. And with that, I was able to convince the sugar refinery to change their mind, not relocate to Chicago, but come here. And they could have easy access to that Beltline railway without any sort of delays coming from Chicago. And here we are, folks. You go down there, you're going to hear business, you're going to hear noise. The railway gets built. And once the railway was built, the sugar refinery comes in, and all of a sudden you've got people from all over the world coming here, settling here, living here. They're building their houses right down there. So needless to say, I'm proud. Once I was angry, but I'm proud to have served as mayor of Waukegan for 3 terms. And you know something? I think I might have inspired the politicians as well. You know, I think since I've been gone, I don't think Illinois or Waukegan is ever going to see any more corrupt politicians. My friends, I thank you for listening. I got to get back to my walk. My wife worries that when I'm late. So I thank you for visiting here, but don't forget, we got a wire mill coming down that way. This is the future. I think Waukegan will overtake Chicago and become a true city of progress. Thank you, folks.
Hutchinson lived until 1902 and is buried here with his 2 wives. Waukegan's population doubled after Hutchinson's efforts to bring industry here. Hutchinson is regarded by some as being Waukegan's most successful mayor.
Well, that's awful kind. Thank you. Well, enjoy the rest of the walk.
Thank you, sir.
He died in 1902. His second wife,
I apologize for the wet ground. This is Marie Worcester.
Well, good afternoon, friends.
Hello.
I often come to this lovely place on a beautiful day like today. It's where my husband Alexander was laid to rest back in 1903. And in some ways it seems like yesterday that I lost him, but it's been now, what? This is 1914, it's been 11 years. I can hardly believe sometimes that he's gone. We were married young. He was 23, I was a mere 17. And I emigrated from Germany with my parents and my siblings when I was a very young teenager. And that explains why my German accent is non-existent. I've lived here so many years. I still speak German, but I also speak as an American today. Alexander came to this country when he was a bit older. He'd been in the silk manufacturing business in Germany. And when he got here, his English was not quite good enough for him to enter into business. But he found a wonderful, wonderful career as a manager and director of German theaters. We lived all over the Midwest, pretty much. We lived in Cincinnati, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and of course, Chicago. But Waukegan was our very favorite spot. It was here in 1875 that we bought our beautiful vacation home. where we spent all of our summers. It was called Lilac Ledge, and the house still stands on Washington Street, just outside of downtown, on one of the beautiful ravines in our city. We loved entertaining folks from all over the country, mostly from the theater, and we entertained all the time when we were here. We loved our house, and we had such wonderful times there. Unfortunately, when Alexander passed away, the memories were just too difficult for me to deal with. So a year after he died, I sold the house to the Foley family, and they've resided there ever since, and the house still stands. Well, Alexander's death came as a terrible shock. We retired to Lilac Ledge, and just a few months later, he died. You can imagine how difficult that was. But I was very, very proud to have been able to erect this wonderful monument to his career and to his memory. This is the very first mausoleum here in Oakwood Cemetery. And I will tell you that it cost quite a bit of money. But Alexander left me in rather good spirit, in good shape. I am worth over $500,000. My money has allowed me to be a world traveler and to indulge in a hobby that gives me pleasure. You may notice that my diamonds are very lovely. I love jewelry of all kinds. And when I travel, my jewels travel with me, tucked away for safekeeping, but they're always with me. Well, I must confess that just a couple of years after Alexander died, I made a grave mistake. I married Mr. Merriweather, well known here in Waukegan. And after that, I discovered that there are worse things than being lonely. So I divorced the man just a couple of years later. And you can imagine the scandal, the gossip. But my wealth and my position allowed me to rise above that. And it was a good decision that I made. Well, Alexander's career was more illustrious than mine, but I was quite an actress in my day. I love to look over some of the reviews of my performances, and I have a couple here that I carry with me. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just share a couple with you. I starred in a play called The Distinguished Marriage at the New Chicago Theater. That was in 1875, the year that we bought Lilac Ledge. And one reviewer published this review of my performance. Miss Marie Wolfe, of course I acted under my maiden name, Wolfe. Miss Marie Wolfe fills the main role. She's an accomplished actress, famous for her beauty. Of course, I'm an old lady now, but I was young and beautiful back then. And here's another review of my acting at the same theater. Miss Wolfe acted her part very timely and with much feeling. For the first time since her appearance in this city, she had a part in which she was compelled to show her qualities as a singer, as well as an actress. Though she would hardly be able to fill a position in the Italian opera, yet as an amateur, she did quite well and gave much satisfaction. Well, I do enjoy looking back on those days. You know, Alexander and I never had children, but I feel blessed that we were able to share so much of our lives together in the theater, in the friends that we made, in our beautiful home here in Waukegan. And as I told you earlier, I am a world traveler, and so in just a couple of weeks, my dear friend Mrs. Richards and I are sailing to England, where we will stay in London for perhaps a week, 2 weeks, a month, I don't know how long. I do hope to be able to have an audience with King George while I'm there. Well, thank you for coming today. I hope you enjoy the rest of this beautiful afternoon.
Thank you, Marie. During Marie's trip to England, she became very ill and passed away. The Waukegan newspapers announced they cremated Mrs. Worcester. Niece reaching London after finding aunt's body finds nothing but her ashes. Was there foul play? Where are her jewels? After a few days of speculation on what happened to her, they found out that when she knew she was dying, she actually made plans and she asked the U.S. London consul to have her cremated to save her family expenses. The location of the Worcester home, if you folks know where Lilac Ledge Apartments is, Lilac Ledge Apartments gets its name from the original mansion that once stood there, Lilac Ledge.
Thank you.
That's a good question. I'm not really sure because some of these people, I think one of the characters, we've got one here from 1998. That was Mary Worcester. I think it's a different actor who did it back. It was 20 years ago, but I could be wrong. Oh yeah, yes. The cemeteries, when back in the late 1880s and early 1890s, they used to have fencing around each of the family plots. It looked like the way they looked in the horror films, you know. It was a lot like that. And those people who had family here, they were the people who would take care of those plots. Now it's all taken care of by the city, and so that fencing is no longer here. So it makes it easier for the city to do their work.
Over here?
You two really need to stay.
So go right ahead, sir. Sorry. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. James W. Woodman.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
My name is James Woodman, and I was born in 1870. And ironically, I have been honored to come back to you once again. I came and spoke to you once in 2003, and now I'm back in 2019. The story I have to tell you today is about a journalist, a poet, and a historian. That's me. I was born in 1870, and one of my favorite stories that I told all my life was how I escaped the Chicago fire. I was in my mother's arms at the age of 1 in 1871, when my mother and my 3 sisters went to the Clyburn farm, and there we watched the city of Chicago burn to the ground. My mother stayed there a couple days and knew that there was no going back. So we settled in Deerfield, and there I went to school. I loved to write. There was just such joy in writing. So I started a newspaper in Libertyville called The Independent, a weekly newspaper. And I took as my partner Frank Just. So there were 3 of us to put this paper out. Frank, myself, and Frank's sister Elizabeth. Now you might have noticed my tombstone sitting over that way that had the black-eyed Susans in front of it and the American flags. That's where I'm buried. And next to me is Christian Just, Frank's mother and father. Christian Just was a blacksmith here in Waukegan. Well, anyway, Frank and I decided to create this newspaper in Libertyville. And I was very interested at first, but I kind of lost interest in Frank, and I kind of lost interest in the newspaper, and I kind of focused right in on his sister Elizabeth. She was quite the looker. Well, I knew that if I was going to marry Elizabeth, which I really wanted to do, I wouldn't be in Libertyville. I would be coming back to Waukegan, where her family was. So I said to Frank, I says, I'll sell you the newspaper. And this was in 1892. I sold him the newspaper, and he stayed in Libertyville, and I came to Waukegan with Elizabeth and got married. So Frank was no longer my business partner. He was now my brother-in-law. And we had a friendship until the day I died. Well, when I came to Waukegan, I had to find some work to do. So I did a little writing, and I did some commuting to Chicago, and working at an advertising agency. Well, it wasn't long, I got restless again, and in 1914 I bought the Waukegan Gazette newspaper here in Waukegan, and I operated that for several years. And every day when I went to the Gazette, I could sit at my typewriter and and I created a poem. And my poems ran in the Gazette every single day. And I was very fortunate. I could just sit at the typewriter and type a poem up and put it in the newspaper. My poems are about the very common things that we all have in common. Love of country, love of family, and love of the people that we've known during our lifetime. And those are the center point of most of my poems. Well, I sold the Gazette in 1919 and got restless again and went back to Chicago, commuted in Chicago. And I did that because there was so much to learn about advertising and writing and the wholesale business at that time. I worked in Chicago until I retired in 1935. And immediately when I retired in 1935, my brother-in-law Frank, by that time, had bought the News and the Sun papers here in Waukegan and created the Waukegan New Sun, and asked me if I wanted to come back to work. And I said, sure. I had a lot more poems I wanted to write. And I also did historical sketches of Lake County, going right back to the Indians. So that was our association with Frank and the Just family. I had 3 kids. By 1927, I had produced 3 books. One was called Around the Pier, about the kids growing up on the pier and playing at the pier in Waukegan. One was called When Babies Cry, because by 1927, I had 3 children. I had Elgene, James Jr., and Jim. So I thought, I have an amount of writing in my head, so I just kept writing. And I worked for the Just family from 1935 all the way to the time of my death in 1948. Now the thing is, many people would say I lived in a very different time. It was very different then, less stressful. It was just a better time to live. But I've got to tell you, that during my time, when I was a young man, I administered to the veterans of the Spanish-American War. I lived through World War I. I lived through the Depression, and I lived through World War II. In 1944, I lost my wife Elizabeth, and so I continued to work. And it was about a week or so before I passed away, I caught a cold. And I just kept working because I was so serious about what I did. And I caught pneumonia, and I died at Victory Hospital in 1948. So you think about the time in which I lived. And Frank had 2 sons, Ward Just and William Just, who took over the paper. Frank died in 1953. Now you all remember the 60s. Again, a very turbulent time in our country. So my 2 nephews from the New Sun decided to go into the archives and find my poems. From 1969 to November of 1970, the New Sun printed 1 poem of mine every single day. And they were about the things that united us, that made us the same, not different. Now, I have some poems that I will leave with you today, but there's one poem that I wrote about the folks in Waukegan, and it's called Genesee Street, and I'd like to read it to you before I end my speech today. I've walked through many thoroughfares in this my native land. Some of them I found quite narrow, others quite grand. Tall buildings and electric lights of every size and hue were sights enough to cause delight, thrill me through and through. But when I get back home again, there's always seems to be the quickening of my heartbeat as I walk down Genesee. In many ways, it's different than some other streets I've been on. A fellow feels an interest in the other folks he meets. You see, the town was founded by men who came to give. Their very thought and effort to make a place to live. The job they started carries on, it seems as though to me. And so I say, no other street is just like Genesee. Come join with me, my friends. Let's hope that when the time draws nigh, when you and I must leave these parts and bid this world goodbye, that we may make the journey through lanes of roses and bloom, where angel songs and sunshine will cast out fear and gloom, where friendliness and charity and joy will be as free as the street we love so well, the street we call Genesee.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Oh, good. I was going to answer.
If you care to have some poems.
Sure.
Shortly after writing his last poem to be published, James Woodman caught pneumonia and passed away at the age of 77.
Just happen to know the Independent Register was downtown Libertyville. It's now Mickey Finn's. It is.
Is that for Mickey Finn?
Yeah. I shared an office with the Independent Register.
I got one extra. I remember reading these columns.
Yeah.
This is great. I'm so glad we had this.
And if folks are ready, we're just going to go right back up this path, and we're going to go to the storytellers, okay?
Thank you, folks. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
You remember me? I've done this. This is the second time I've done this. I did it in 2003.
I wasn't here then.
The day.
Right here, these are actually military veterans. It's part of our project. But as far as like the materials go, some of them are limestone, some are marble. The limestone ones tend to be the ones that really deteriorate quickly.
Is there any way to clean them?
Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. It just depends on how much is left. Yeah. But there are ways that I guess people can restore them, you know, and get it so that you can read them again.
Yeah, that would be nice.
The first one is the story of the Lady Elgin. And these are very truncated stories, so they're not going to be all the details that I want to show. Lady Elgin was you might say it was one of the premier ships of the Great Lakes in the 1860s. And it had cabins on them. It had public area, a cabin as you see sailing around. But make a long story short, the Irish militia out of Milwaukee hired Lady Elgin to take it to Chicago, and they left on the late evening of September 6th to make it to Chicago so they could spend the whole day there and also hear Stephen A. Douglas in a speech because he was running against Abraham Lincoln in the fall election to be president of the United States. Well, they spent their day in Chicago, and 11 o'clock at night, they were anxious to get on the ship and get out of the harbor and get back to Milwaukee by morning. However, Captain Wilson was not too happy about taking out the ship because there was a northeaster down the lake, and he didn't want to really have to deal with that. But they persuaded him that he needed to get back with them so they could get to work for the next day. So at 11:30, with more people than what he brought down, he sailed out of the Chicago harbor 10 miles out into the shipping lane and then headed north towards Milwaukee. 2:30 in the evening, in the morning, along comes the Augusta. The Augusta was a sailing ship loaded with lumber that had shifted in the storm, and it was all on one side of the ship, and the ship was running on its rails. And the sails were still up, and it was going lickety-split. And you might say it was out of control. And the people, the crew on the Augusta, saw the Lady Elgin because it had the lights on the ship, in the deck, and in the public areas. But before they knew it, they were on top of it, and there was a crash. The bow of the Augusta went into the side. The Lady Elgin behind the side paddle looked in there for a few minutes, and then the wave action pulled it out. The Augusta continued on going south, and the Lady Elgin continued north. Well, the captain went down into the hull of the ship to see what damage had been done below water. And there was a big hole, and the workers were trying to stuff mattresses and anything that was get in the hole. Well, you can see that this was he had all the cattle and any other cargo that was down there dumped out into the lake, and he went back up to the main deck. The first mate was steering the ship, and the first mate asked the captain, "Shall we head to shore?" And the captain says, "I'm not going to make it." Within 20 minutes, the boiler fell out of the bottom of the ship. Remember, this was a wood hull, 139 feet long, and all the timber started to break up, and people, over 400 people that were on the ship, started grabbing anything that would float to keep from drowning in the lake. By sunrise, about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, all this debris was coming towards the shore, and it was hitting somewhere between Evanston and Winnetka. And the people who were on these pieces of wood, they could see the shore, but they couldn't get to it because the wave action is so back and forth in such a narrow lake that it would push them back out. So most of these people that didn't make it to shore died within visual distance of the shore. 297 people that they know of died in this event. It was the greatest tragedy still on the sea of the Great Lakes. Don't forget, the Lady Elgin, or the Eastland was more, but that wasn't even in the lake. That was at the harbor in Chicago, where something like 1,000 more died. So, what's the legacy that came out of that? Well, one, most of the people on the ship were Irishmen, and a lot of them were the political leaders in Milwaukee. So with them all gone, the political power shifted to the Germans. And it's been there ever since. So the other thing, legacy out of this story, is the fact that rules of navigation changed, so that every ship had to have lights port and starboard, and bow and stern, different colors, and that included the sailing ships, because at this time, 1860, there were 1,700 sailing ships still on the Great Lakes. So those are two legacies that came out of this story, tragedy, and the man who owned the ship had sold this 2 months before. He's buried in this cemetery. His name is Albert Spencer. He and his wife are buried in this cemetery, but he didn't own it at the time. But that gives us credence to sell this. Story number 2. Vincent Price, born in 1832, Troy, New York, on the Mohawk River across from Albany. At the age of 19, he was home for the summer, watching his mother making biscuits in their family kitchen. And his mother was complaining that the biscuits always came out hard, and they weren't very digestible, but she continued to make them. So when he went back to pharmacy school in the fall, he got into the lab and he got experimenting around, and he came up with something that you still use today, baking powder. I can remember when I was a kid and I made oatmeal cookies, and I forgot to put the baking powder in. Oh no, hey, hi. So became a doctor, pharmacology as well as chemistry, and he married a gal from Buffalo, and they sailed to Chicago, and he wanted to be in the country, so they settled in Waukegan. And then he tried selling his product, and people would put it in their ingredients. They were kind of skeptical of it, and he had to start giving it away. And this was a part of the business he didn't like. He liked to experiment. So one day when he was, but it did take off, as you know. We're still using it today, if you don't forget it. So one day he was making berries and having berries and cream in his kitchen, and the berries were gone and the cream was left, and the cream was kind of tainted with the berries, and so was the juice. And he said, boy, there's got to be some way to do this that still had the flavor and everything. So he goes out and he invents extract. And that's used in baking, that's used in candy making, different flavors of candy. Then he got into the candy business. All his family, 3 boys and 2 girls, all were involved in the candy, or the one business or the other. And he built 2 wonderful homes on Grand Avenue in Waukegan, just east of Jackson Street. There's 2 remaining on the south side of the street. You can't miss them if you see them. Victorian, and the 2 on the north side has been torn down. There's one last thing that you're probably asking, where is this Vincent Price, the actor, come in? Well, he is the great-grandson of Dr. Vincent Price. And he was born in St. Louis. And one of his sons ran a candy factory that was part of the Price enterprise. That's the legacies of the Price family. And my last one is Albert Jorn. And he's buried over here underneath these pine trees. And he is a immigrant from Germany, born about 1852. And he came to the United States, and he learned the foundry trade, and he was a pattern foreman at the Chicago Hardware Foundry in North Chicago. And he came after my grandfather, who was also at the foundry, and he was on the board of directors as well, Mr. Jorn, after my grandfather did. And his wife died in the late 1920s, just before the Depression, and he took in a lady to take care of his housekeeping. Well, that went on through the 30s and into the 40s, and his son and daughter-in-law were afraid that Mr. Jorn was going to leave his money to the gypsy lady. That's what they call his housekeeper, a gypsy lady. So they had him sent up to Elgin for the mental institution. And Mr. Jorn was not ready for the mental institution by a long shot. And he got a lawyer out of Chicago, got himself out, back up to Waukegan, and met with Gerald Snyder Sr. and told him his dilemma that he didn't want to leave his money to his son and daughter-in-law. So Mr. Snyder said, we want to provide a camp for the YMCA up in Northwoods so they get that experience. And so when Mr. Jorn died, $60,000 went to the Waukegan Y for the purpose of building Camp Jorn. Camp Jorn was run for 6 years prior to Jorn having it by a group out of Milwaukee, and it was called Camp Thunderbolt, and it was just for boys. And prior to that, property had been owned for 30 years by Charles Nash out of Kenosha. Nash Motor Car Company as his private hunting and fishing lodge. It's on 80 acres with an island on Rest Lake. is still in operation today, and it is a standalone YMCA camp. So that's Mr. Jorn's legacy, which came out of a rather sordid story. So nobody's pulling my chain here. Are you finished, or you got to go on? I think we're done.
Yeah, we're done.
You're finished with everything? I'll tell you the rest of the story.
Okay.
Since nobody's interested. In 2006, I was the board chair of the Camp Jorn YMCA, which was a branch of the Waukegan YMCA. And the bank had $9 million. YMCA in Waukegan had $9 million worth of debt because it was trying to finance the Vernon Hills. And the bank wanted half the money back. And I knew that it wasn't going to happen. That they weren't going to get the money out of Waukegan. And they wanted the camp because the camp was worth $7.5 million. And I said as the board chair, no, you're not getting the camp. We will raise your appreciated value of what you put into the camp originally, which was $20,000. So that $20,000 was now worth $3 million. And I knew we could raise it because camps build relationships. And also, Vilas County, where Camp Jorn is, has more millionaires than any other county in Wisconsin. But they're all second homes. And their homes are bigger than the homes down there. And they don't want development. And they knew the bank would develop. So we did raise the funds. So that's my legacy. And others too. There was others involved too. Some gave $1 million. Under $1 million. And some small amounts. They're debt free. Thank you.
Camp Jorn is so wonderful.
I don't get to tell that story to everyone.
You're out of time.
Tell me to move on.
Now the police are coming.
You have to go right back to the benches where you started.
Hey, hi, Quentin. Hi, Becky.
I'm 51.
Okay, because I'm from.
Hey, hi. How are you?
How are you doing?
I'm good. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming today. Hey, thanks for going.